Ezreal, and I wish more people would use it like this, is he's going to use his True Shot Barrage to clear the minion waves on the sides. And Hai is just going to roam from lane to lane using his distortion to get between the lanes quickly, and they're just going to clear waves. Coast is not going to be able to push without grouping, so what we're going to see happening is basically C9 says, like, yeah, okay, we're going to play your game. We're going to force you to play your game. We're going to force you to group up and fight us. But because, you know, it's on C9's terms, what's going to happen is C9's going to, you know, be the one starting the fights. And it's not going to be optimal because Coast, you know, has to get their ultimates down on several members of C9. They have to get pretty good ultimates to actually win those fights. And they're not going to be able to get those. This is a really high mobility team composition from C9, and it works out really well for them. In that they're able to, you know, just clear out the side waves so effectively, and then that they're able to avoid so much of the AoE from Coast. So I think this is what I wanted to talk about next. Yeah. So Cloud9, they know that Coast is at a pretty strong point right now. Coast is actually ahead in gold, but, you know, C9 has basically neutralized the minion pressure from Coast, and they say, okay, let's engage on them while they're in their power window, but let's force it, you know, on our own terms, like I was saying. So Lemonation is going to initiate here, and that seems pretty silly. Like, Cloud9 is behind. They're not in a position where they want to be initiating a fight. But what they do is they force a fight. They force Coast to use their ultimates here. Okay, so this hits Hai and Lemonation. Hai is actually able to get out. And at this point, this is a really spread out fight, which is exactly what Cloud9 want. So Ball's in the back line, kills Daydreamin and WizFujin. Or does he? Yeah, he kills both of them. And then, you know, of course, Mundo in the back doing a lot. But this ends up being a relatively even trade. It's 2 kills for Coast versus 3 for C9, and Zion Spartan's going to get away here. But, you know, this is especially where the Blazer and King comes in to effect. He's able to get away from Mundo, and he's actually enough of a threat to Mundo that Zion Spartan doesn't want to go in on him. So C9 forces this fight. It goes pretty even, but, you know, they're able to come out ahead because they forced it on their own terms. And then they're actually able to pick up the dragon afterwards. So they're just basically, like, stalling out Coast's power window. They're not gaining huge advantages off of the plays that they're making, but they're like, nobody's making a huge amount of progress, which works out for C9 because C9 will be much more relevant in the late game because after level 16, you know, the longer the game lasts after all the champions hit level 16, the stronger C9 is because they are much less reliant on their ultimates. And that's where having really strong items is going to work out really well for C9. So they're going to do this kind of similar, forcing a fight on their own terms several more times. It works really effectively. So the next time is several minutes later. I believe it's in the top lane. Yeah. So Coast have grouped up. And what you'll notice is, you know, they want to be putting on the split push pressure here. Zion Spartan wants to be splitting a lane. But the way that Cloud9 has been using their Ezreal and their LeBlanc to just clear out the side waves and, you know, neutralize this Mundo basically. It's kept Coast from creating any split pressure, so they're just basically grouped up. They're like, whatever, let's do this. And I really think that they should have maybe committed more to the split pushing. I think it could have worked out better for them if they were a little more patient. But, you know, with this team composition, they can't afford to be super patient either, because they're gonna fall off like that after that level 16, like I said. So okay, C9 doesn't particularly want to fight here. They're still not at an advantage, but they managed to get this really good solar flare down, and they're like, okay, let's go and let's force this fight before they can before Coast can force it on their own terms. I don't like that Sneaky used his arcane shift to go in there. It's kind of sketchy, but whatever. Anyway, again, it's going to be a pretty even trade. Shifter picks up, I believe, 2 kills there, but again, it's a 3 for 2. So C9, while Coast is in this power window, still forcing fights on their own terms, stalling it out, keeping Coast from snowballing too hard. And it's really smart, because a lot of teams would be like, no, we don't want to fight them right now. This is not a good fight for us. But C9 know that they can at least go even if they have a good initiation. And they know that the longer this game goes, the stronger they're going to be. So they use it really, really well. So I think there's 1 or 2 more things I want to go over from this game, and then I'm going to go on to the last game, which is TSM versus Cloud9. It was a really interesting game. So, sorry. Where was it? Right, okay, this is actually the last thing I'm going to talk about, because after this it just starts completely snowballing in C9's favor. So at this point, I think this is another dragon fight I'm going to talk about, but we're going to see how Coast's mentality kind of changes because of how these fights have been working out. So, I mean, Coast absolutely, if they're able to, fight on their own terms, get a good initiation, they absolutely have the advantage. But because of the way the fights have been turning out, their mentality gets in this really bad place where they don't even try to fight. So, and that's going to work out very poorly for them. So they group up for this dragon, and by all means they should be able to group up for this dragon and win a fight. But first of all, they're like really nervously going for it. They take a minute or a second to even start the dragon in the first, or I guess it hasn't spawned yet. Never mind, I'm talking out my butt. But okay, Cloud9 know the timer. They get there, and both teams kind of have this siege around dragon. Yeah, so this flank here from C9 ends up being really relevant, but what you'll notice is Coast should know that both Leona and LeBlanc are over here, that High and Lemonation are over here, and that's kind of almost their opportunity to go in. Does he have his okay, this is actually because I think maybe Daydreamin should have prioritized the talisman even more, but because they've been having trouble securing objectives, Daydreamin doesn't have that talisman yet. It's going to be hard for them to get in on Cloud9. So they're starting this dragon. And C9 are honestly positioning a lot more forward than they should be. Like, this is not a super safe position for them to be in, because quite honestly, Coast's initiation is scary. So Coast should be positioning more aggressively, trying to zone off these 3 members while the other 2 members of C9 come from behind. And what you can do when a team is flanking is you can just initiate before the flank is ready. So actually, they kind of half commit to this dragon, and then the flank comes in. And Meteos ends up securing the dragon. So this fight starts at a really awkward time. Nintendo gets in on here, and he's far enough away from the dragon that he can't even secure it with Smite. So Meteos ends up getting the Smite there. And then this fight is like split apart exactly like C9 would want it to. So at this point, C9 just collapse in on them and avoid all of the AoE and get several kills along with this dragon. And from that point, Cloud9 has enough of an advantage that they can just win the game. And a really good Q over the wall by Lee Sin secures that kill. I don't remember if they went for the Baron right after that. I would assume they did, because Cloud9's shot calling is really decisive, and they'd like to do things like immediately go for Baron after winning a fight. But, eventually Cloud9 took that advantage that they gained. They took that Baron and they closed it out. So, just to review real quick, Coast honestly had a really strong team composition at level 6. If they had aggressively forced, and at that one dragon when C9 just got there first and forced the fight and zoned them out, if Coast had gotten there first, or maybe if they had just avoided the engagement from C9, although it was a pretty aggressive engagement, it worked out well for C9. If they had gotten there first, it could have turned out so differently, because they could have had that fight on their own terms, or they could have just taken the dragon uncontested. So from there it just kind of snowballed, because C9 was ahead of the curve every single time for every single fight. They initiated just a little more decisively. And like I said, this is a really mobile team. It's going to be hard for Coast to get in on them. So a well-played champion select by C9, and knowing how the matchup between each team composition works, it allowed them to take advantage of their own power spikes and win the game. And it was an awesome game to watch, because it's just C9 doing their thing.